I was 12 when I realized effort didn't matter if no one wanted to see it. It was a Sunday morning in May, and I had been up before anyone else. Scissors, glitter, and paper scattered across the kitchen table like confetti after a parade that never happened. I even brewed a pot of coffee for Mom, the way I'd seen her do on sleepy Saturdays, though I didn't dare pour her a cup. That wasn't the point. The point was the card. I folded the pink construction paper carefully, twice so the crease was neat, and glued down foil hearts I had saved from old candy wrappers. The glitter clung to my fingertips, and I had to brush it off 3 times before I wrote the poem inside. Not something copied from a magazine or the back of a Hallmark card. No. I wrote it myself. About how her perfume smelled like vanilla, how her laugh filled a room, how she made toast better than anyone else. I even drew little stars in the corners, just because. It took me 2 hours. When I was done, I tied a thin silver ribbon around it and placed it inside a white envelope. I held it in my lap through breakfast, through Cameron's joke about his gym teacher, through Liam's milk spilling onto the counter. I waited for the right moment, the one where she would look at me the way she looked at my brothers. By late afternoon, the house had shifted into celebration mode. Diane, my mother, had changed into her favorite blue wrap dress, the one she wore to church on holidays and school awards nights. Her earrings matched, of course. The table was set with cloth napkins. I could already smell the cinnamon from her rolls baking. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," Cameron announced, grinning as he handed her a small, shiny bag. She opened it slowly with a mock gasp. "You didn't," she said, pulling out a perfume bottle, the kind she always kept on the top shelf of her dresser. "Oh, you remembered," she added, pulling him into a hug, one arm around his back, the other cradling his cheek. "My sweet boy." Then came Liam, proudly holding up a mug that read, "Number 1, Mom," with cartoon tulips painted around the rim. "Dad helped me pick it out." She laughed, louder this time, ruffling his already messy hair. "I love it, baby. I'm drinking from this tomorrow morning." And then there was me. I stood, careful not to interrupt, and stepped forward with the envelope held in both hands. I didn't say much, just, "This is for you." She took it, barely glancing at it, her smile already fading. "Thank you, honey," she said, turning to place it on the kitchen counter behind her next to the toaster. She never opened it. No hug, no smile, no questions. Just placement. Like she was filing it away for later. Or never. I returned to my seat and picked at my salad, watching the card out of the corner of my eye. Still untouched. Still perfectly sealed. At dinner, Diane raised her glass of iced tea and smiled wide. "To my wonderful boys," she said, "who made this day so special." Cameron lifted his water like a champagne flute. Liam giggled. Dad nodded, his mouth full of chicken. No one looked at me. I waited for someone to say something, for her to add, "And Taryn, too," or even just glance my way. But all I got was the sound of silverware scraping plates and the hum of distant lawnmowers outside. After dessert, store-bought lemon pie because who has time for homemade? Diane stood up and smoothed the front of her dress. "Liam, go grab the camera. Let's take a quick photo before it gets too dark." Cameron was already rising from his chair, adjusting his shirt collar in the reflection of the window. I stood too. No, just me and the boys," she said with a little laugh, brushing past me toward the patio. Mark, my dad, reached for the camera without a word. He looked at me, just briefly, his mouth opening like he might say something. Then he didn't. I stood frozen beside the table, my napkin still folded in my hand, and watched as she posed between my brothers, one arm wrapped around each of them. She tilted her chin slightly, smiled wide, and held it just long enough for the shutter to click. I don't remember what happened to the card after that, whether it stayed there all week, whether she ever read it, or if it ended up in the trash with the pie box and paper napkins. I just remember how that moment felt. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even sadness, not exactly. It was a quiet awareness, like the way your foot goes numb under the table and you don't notice until you try to stand. Later that night, I helped Dad rinse dishes while the others watched a movie in the living room. He handed me a wet plate and said, "Thanks for pitching in, sweetheart." I nodded. Sure. We didn't talk about the card. We didn't talk about the picture. And he didn't ask me how I felt. Maybe he didn't know how. Maybe I wouldn't have known what to say. But I did know this. I had given my mother something real that day. And it wasn't a perfume or a mug or a joke. It was me, and she didn't open it. That was the first time I started to understand how a person could shrink so small inside their own family that they vanished completely, and no one even noticed. And so I started learning how to disappear. Quietly, politely. Without a sound, in our house, winning a soccer game meant pizza from Mario's and balloons from the corner store. Getting a full scholarship meant, "That's nice, dear," followed by a sip of lukewarm coffee and a glance at the clock to check if Liam's practice was almost over. I stopped expecting recognition the same year I learned how to tie a tie for my debate tournament, because no one in the house had time to help. At 16, I had learned to laminate my own certificates at the school library, the honor roll, the state science competition, the volunteer service award. They were all slid carefully into a folder I kept under my bed. My name was printed on them, but at home, it felt like I was still invisible. When I made the regional final for a creative writing contest, my English teacher called the house to leave a message. Diane never mentioned it. 2 days later, Cameron was in the local paper again, this time for pitching an app concept to a youth entrepreneurship panel. It wasn't even a full business plan, just an idea on a napkin. The journalist called him visionary. Diane called him my future CEO. She posted the article on the fridge and bought extra copies to mail out in Christmas cards. Liam's soccer team made it to the semifinals that year. He scored the tie-breaking goal, and Diane threw a backyard barbecue. There were string lights in the trees and burgers stacked high. She invited the neighbors, printed a banner, even baked cupcakes with green icing to match his school colors. I watched from the kitchen window, my hands still damp from rinsing dishes. I had gotten a letter that same day, acceptance into an early college program. I never brought it up. By 18, I was living in a cramped dorm room in St. Paul with 2 roommates who called me the quiet one. I didn't mind. Quiet had long become my armor. I made the dean's list every semester. I took on a part-time job at the library, tutored freshmen, joined a coding club no one knew existed. Diane never visited campus. When I received the scholarship extension for the rest of my undergrad, I bought myself a slice of pizza from the food truck across the quad. I sat on the curb watching a squirrel try to steal someone's granola bar and felt, not joy exactly, something steadier, like proof. A small confirmation that I was still moving forward, even if no one was watching. That night, I emailed Ms. Patel. She had been my high school advisor, one of the only adults who looked me in the eye and meant it. She replied the same day, "I'm proud of you, Taryn. You have the kind of mind that builds things people don't see coming." Then she mentioned something called the Ridgeline Incubator, an experimental program for young developers with vision. I didn't feel like someone with vision. I felt like someone who stared too long at blinking cursors and forgot to eat dinner, but I applied anyway. Spring semester of sophomore year, I built a prototype in my dorm room. I borrowed books on UI/UX, taught myself to debug in Python at midnight. My roommates went to parties. I stayed in, balancing my laptop on my knees, listening to lo-fi beats and the hum of the vending machine in the hall. When the email arrived, it had no subject line, just the sender, Ridgeline Ventures. I opened it on a Thursday morning while waiting for the shuttle. "We're pleased to offer you a place in our summer cohort." I read it twice, then once more, then I stared at it until the shuttle pulled up and I nearly missed it. That evening, I called home. Diane answered on speakerphone, like always. "Hey, Mom," I said, "I got into that accelerator I told you about." "That's great, dear. Is Liam coming home this weekend? I need to ask him something about the truck." I held the phone for a second longer than I needed to. "Not sure," I said. I didn't mention that I'd be moving into a downtown loft space, paid for by a grant. or that I'd be working alongside actual investors and early-stage founders, or that the acceptance rate for Ridgeline was lower than most Ivy League internships. She didn't ask, and I didn't offer. The next night I celebrated by ordering pad thai and splitting a mango sticky rice with a girl from my data structures class. She said, "You're kind of a genius, huh?" And I laughed. Not because I believed her, but because it felt good to be spoken to like I existed. Later, alone in my room, I opened a new note on my phone and typed, "Things I've done without permission, applied, got accepted, built something real, started dreaming out loud, I didn't save it." I just stared at the words until my eyes blurred, then closed the screen. In our family, Spotlight was a finite resource, and the boys had claimed it all before I ever stepped on stage. So I stopped waiting for the applause. I stopped asking for space at the table, and I started building my own. I didn't tell anyone when I launched my company. Not my parents, not my brothers, not even the handful of old classmates who followed me on social media. By that point, I had learned the truth. Applause is optional. Momentum is not. The LLC papers came back on a gray Tuesday. I was sitting in the corner of my studio apartment with a cracked space heater and a half-eaten muffin from the corner cafe. My name sat at the bottom of the document, Taryn E. Whitfield, sole founder and director. I stared at it for a long time. Then I closed the tab and opened my to-do list. I didn't even let myself feel proud. Instead, I dove into freelance work, UX consulting gigs, ghostwriting tech blog posts, designing slide decks for founders who couldn't spell check. Every paycheck, every invoice, every long night was fuel for my prototype. I named it Harbor. It wasn't flashy, but it was steady, intuitive, and exactly the kind of tool I wished existed when I volunteered in college. It helped organizations track volunteers, coordinate teams, and eliminate the kind of chaos that scares good people away from good causes. No one knew I was building it. That was the point. Then came Nina. We met through a mutual friend who said, "You two are either going to love each other or drive each other crazy." Maybe both. Nina Alvarez had a laugh that made people turn around in cafes and a brain that moved 3 steps ahead of most rooms. She wore oversized glasses and kept notebooks full of chaotic bullet points that somehow made sense to only her. "I'm not good at small talk," I warned her during our first coffee meeting. "Perfect," she said. "Neither is payroll." By the end of the month, she was Harbor's operations lead. She didn't just believe in the mission, she sharpened it. She made systems where I only saw instincts. She joked that my emotional radar was my superpower, while hers was getting stubborn printers to submit to her will. We worked from borrowed desks in co-working spaces that smelled like drywall and old ambition. We shared takeout on floors, chased deadlines past midnight, and built momentum out of thin air. We also collected rejection emails. Some were polite. Most were indifferent. Not the right fit. Too early stage. Circle back when you've got traction. Nina printed them out once and turned them into origami swans. I kept one pinned above my desk that read simply, "We're not interested in quiet founders." We kept going anyway. One afternoon, we demoed Harbor for a nonprofit director who'd seen too many startups pitch sleek but shallow ideas. At the end, he looked up and said, "You're the only one who asked the right questions." I wrote that down in my journal like it was scripture. Momentum finally arrived in the form of Miss Patel. She had never stopped checking in. Every few months I'd get a note from her. No pressure, no expectations, just the gentle echo of someone who had once seen something in me before I saw it in myself. She invited me to lunch with someone named Mark Silver, an angel investor with no LinkedIn profile and a habit of backing founders with long-shot ideas and long-haul grit. Mark didn't ask for projections. He asked why Harbor mattered. I told him it was a tool for people who are usually overlooked, built by someone who knew how that felt. He nodded once. "Send me the deck." 3 weeks later, we had our first funding. It wasn't life-changing, but it was rent for a year and enough to hire 2 interns. Nina cried. I bought us matching coffee mugs with "Quietly Dangerous" printed on the side. By early 2021, we had a tiny team, a real office with plants that kept dying and being replaced, and a rhythm that felt almost calm. We'd stopped talking about success in terms of headlines and started measuring it by how many nonprofits renewed their contracts without us asking. Then came the listing. A consulting firm was looking to sell a portion of its operations, a small, underperforming division that focused on municipal digital strategy. The name was familiar. I pulled up their site. There she was, Diane Whitfield, listed as a lead strategic consultant. I didn't flinch. I just started reading the financials. The acquisition was clean, silent, and exactly what I needed. Harbor absorbed the division, retained a few key staff, and made space for its own model to take root. The paperwork went through under my legal name, Taryn E. Whitfield, CEO. I signed the final page with a pen Nina gave me the day we incorporated. She had engraved the side, "For when your name starts meaning summit." That night, I walked the quiet path back to my apartment and past the bookstore, where I used to spend hours reading in high school. They'd rearranged the windows. It looked unfamiliar now. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel spite. I just felt still. Back home, I made a cup of tea and checked the family group chat for the first time in weeks. Diane had sent out the annual reunion invite. Backyard, Sunday afternoon, casual attire. Bring dessert. The message was impersonal. No looking forward to seeing everyone. No hope you can make it this time, Taryn. Just logistics. For once, I didn't overthink it. I typed one word into the reply box. Yes. No emoji, no context, just yes. I stared at it for a moment before pressing send. I had spent most of my life trying to be seen. Now I was preparing to become something they couldn't ignore. My mother once said I always disappeared during important family moments. I remember the exact words. She said it over a sink full of dishes after Liam's graduation party, her voice light and casual, like she was stating a weather report. You always slip away, Taryn. 1 minute you're here, the next, poof. This time I didn't disappear. I showed up, and I didn't come empty-handed. The spring air was warm and wet with the promise of rain. I parked my car around the corner from the house, even though I knew there'd be room out front. Something about the short walk helped me breathe, helped me brace. The black sedan gleamed under the streetlight, inconspicuous and quiet, just like I'd asked for in the lease agreement. As I sat behind the wheel, phone buzzing once on the passenger seat, I glanced down. Nina. You good? I didn't answer. Not yet. The Whitfield house looked just like always, windows glowing yellow, porch dressed in potted flowers, faint laughter floating through the hedges. The backyard was already buzzing. Through the slats in the fence, I saw paper lanterns bobbing and the familiar long folding table dressed in a floral tablecloth I hadn't seen since Cameron's engagement dinner. It had wine stains in one corner. I remembered because I'd been the one to scrub it quietly after everyone else had gone home. I walked in through the side gate. No announcement, no knock. Someone turned mid-laugh. Oh, Taryn. Cousin Elise, I think. Or maybe she married in. I barely remembered. She came in for a hug that smelled like perfume and felt like obligation. Wow, you look polished, she said, then gave a polite once-over to my blazer and low heels. Just came from somewhere, I murmured, which wasn't a lie. Diane spotted me from across the yard. Her expression didn't quite land on surprise, more like the polite smile you give when a neighbor's kid says hi at the grocery store. Taryn, she said, arms already full of serving platters. Glad you made it. Thanks for the invite, I said. No warmth, just symmetry. My seat was at the far end of the table, near the cooler full of sparkling water and a wobbly folding chair someone had reinforced with duct tape. I didn't comment, just laid my coat gently across the back and sat, slipping the black envelope from my bag into my lap. It was thick, weighted, not just with paper, but with all the things I had folded into silence for 30 years. Dinner was loud, Someone had brought a Bluetooth speaker and soft jazz floated underneath the clinking of cutlery and overlapping stories. Mark, my father, grilled chicken at the edge of the patio, spatula in one hand, beer in the other. He gave me a small nod. I returned it. We didn't need words. Cameron was already talking about his latest real estate flip. A mid-century gem in Edina, got it under asking. Closed in 3 weeks. Liam had his phone out showing vacation photos from Steamboat Springs, hot tubs and ski gear and grins. Plates passed over my head and around me. When the bread basket reached me, it was already empty. I watched. I listened. I didn't interrupt. Diane floated between guests, napkin tucked neatly in her palm, hair pinned just so. Every movement was performance. She complimented side dishes, adjusted a centerpiece, laughed too loud at a joke Liam told that wasn't actually funny. When dessert was brought out, cherry cobbler, a Diane signature, she finally lifted her glass, filled with rosé. She smiled, paused, made sure everyone was looking. "To my beautiful boys," she said brightly, "always leading, always shining." She paused, looked down the table. And, well, the rest, of course. Laughter followed, quick, polite, a ripple of reflex. No one looked at me. I nodded once. "Cheers?" Mark cleared his throat softly. No one noticed. I sat back in my chair and waited. Let the cobbler cool on my plate. Let the night stretch just long enough for comfort to lull everyone into assuming this year would be just like the last. Then, as Diane set her glass down, I reached into my coat pocket. No fanfare, no clearing my throat. I placed the envelope beside her plate, black, thick, unlabeled. She blinked. "What's this?" Her voice had that same tone she used when finding a stray sock in the dryer, mild annoyance wrapped in confusion. I looked at her, calm, even. "I brought you something, Mom," I said, folding my hands in my lap. "Thought you might actually open this one." Silence rolled in like fog. The laughter stopped. Utensils stilled. Napkins dropped slowly into laps. Liam looked up from his phone. Cameron furrowed his brow. Mark stared at the envelope, then at me. Diane's fingers hovered above the envelope, but she didn't touch it. Her lips parted. Nothing came out. The tablecloth, the same one she'd pulled out for Cameron's engagement years ago, fluttered slightly in the breeze. This time it was hosting something different. This time it was hosting the reckoning. She unfolded it slowly, her manicured fingers twitching like the paper might splinter. It was the first time in my life she actually read something I gave her. The backyard had dimmed. The fairy lights cast soft halos onto half-empty wine glasses and dessert-streaked plates. Voices had faded. Conversations curled in on themselves. The silence that remained wasn't awkward. It was electric. Diane sat stiffly in her chair, the heavy black envelope resting just inches from her elbow. She didn't reach for it right away. Instead, she glanced around the table, as if silently polling the audience. But no one offered her a lifeline. Not this time. Finally, with a controlled exhale, she slid her perfectly painted nails beneath the flap and opened the envelope. The rustle of thick paper sounded louder than it should have. She pulled out the document with both hands, held it at arm's length like she couldn't quite trust it. Her lips moved as she scanned the header, then stopped when her eyes landed on the first line of ownership, controlling interest agreement. Effective immediately, Harbor Systems becomes the majority stakeholder in Winton and Slate Consulting. Authorized signatory, Taryn Elise Whitfield, CEO. She blinked once, then again. The confident tilt of her head slipped. The muscles around her mouth twitched. A soft scoff escaped her, but it was hollow. Empty defense. "You bought them?" she asked, voice breaking slightly. "You bought the company?" I didn't blink. Yes. Her eyebrows lifted sharply like that word alone insulted her. She looked down again, scanned the second page, the legal language, the signatures. The reality of it was inked clearly, irrevocably. Her fingers shook as she adjusted her grip, the paper bending slightly between her thumbs. "You..." Her voice dropped. "You did this without telling anyone?" I didn't need permission, I said. I needed it done. Mark leaned over beside her, quietly extending his hand. She hesitated but gave him the document. He read with a kind of focused resignation, nodding faintly when he reached the final signature. He didn't look surprised, just tired. Cameron broke the silence with a forced laugh. Hold on, this is real. You actually own Winton now? I nodded. Through Harbor, 18 months ago. Liam sat back in his chair, shaking his head slowly. But why not tell anyone? I turned toward both of them, calm, clear. Because I knew exactly what you'd do with it, I said. Turn it into a dinner anecdote. Make it about yourselves. Or worse, try to take it from me. The words landed without malice, no sharpness, just truth. Cameron opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. Liam looked at the table, his face blank. Diane, however, stiffened. Her composure cracked at the edges, not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. You did this to embarrass me, she said. Her voice was low now, no longer a host, no longer the center of the story, just a woman at a table she didn't control. I stood. No, I said. I did it so I'd never need this table again. A beat passed. No one reached for another fork. No one dared speak. The silence turned thick, humid with implication. Mark placed the paper back into the envelope and slid it toward her. His gaze never left his hands. I picked up my bag from the ground. Structured, simple, zipped closed. I worked quietly for years, I said, looking at no one and everyone. Built something from nothing, on my own, while you... I let the sentence hang. No need to finish what they already knew. The fairy lights flickered above us. I walked past Cameron, whose mouth was set in a line, past Liam, who looked smaller than I remembered, past the aunts and uncles whose eyes dropped into their drinks, and finally past Diane, still staring at the name at the top of the document like it had betrayed her. As I reached the gate, someone behind me whispered, not mocking, not cruel, just quietly stunned. She's not the quiet one anymore. I didn't turn around because they weren't wrong, and I wasn't coming back. I didn't leave to prove a point. I left because I no longer needed them to see me in order to exist. It's been a week. 7 days since I laid that envelope on the table. 7 nights without family group chats, dinner photos, or carefully staged toasts. No one tagging me in anything. No one pretending I was there. And for the first time, that feels like peace. My new apartment isn't grand. It's minimalist, sunlit, and mostly quiet, except for the soft jazz coming from the Bluetooth speaker and the occasional hum of traffic from the street below. There are no hallway photos, no fridge magnets holding up holiday cards. Just clean space, just light, just me. The sunrise hits my windows directly. The warmth spreads across the hardwood floors, catching in the corners like it's choosing to stay. I didn't realize how much I missed mornings like this, ones that didn't begin with expectation. I'm barefoot in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. I breathe in deep. Hazelnut, a little cinnamon, the kind I used to brew only for guests. Now I brew it for me. My phone buzzes on the counter. Nina. Told you they'd pick you. You're the voice they need, not the noise they're used to. I smile, then swipe up to open the actual invite. Subject, Keynote Confirmation. Women in Tech Leadership Conference speaker Taryn E. Whitfield opening address. There was a time I would have forwarded this to Diane, or at least to Cameron or Liam, some faint reflex hoping for a half-hearted wow or nice job. But not today. I set the phone down, sip again. The coffee tastes like closure. On my way to the desk, I pass the living room shelf. Just one photo frame sits there. I glance at it quickly as if to confirm it's still the only one I need. It's from the product launch last October. I'm standing alone at the mic, smiling, not wide, not forced, but with the quiet pride of someone who finally claimed her own voice. That's the only photo I kept. Earlier this morning, I opened the gallery on my tablet, scrolled to the folder labeled Family Dinners. I didn't linger, just tapped Select All and deleted. No second thoughts, no soft goodbyes. There's one image I still remember, though it no longer lives on any device. It was on Diane's fridge for years, a picture from Liam's birthday. Cameron, Liam, and my mother are front and center, arms around each other, all grins. I had been standing slightly to the side when it was taken. Later, when the photo showed up on the fridge, I was cropped out entirely. I used to stare at that photo and wonder if I'd just imagined being there at all. Now, I don't need it. I deleted it from my mind the moment I closed their front gate. At the desk, I opened my laptop and began typing the keynote. Title, Redefining What It Means to Be the Quiet One. The cursor blinks, then the words come, clean and certain. They told me I was too quiet to lead, but quiet isn't absence. It isn't weakness. It's observation. It's depth. It's choosing to speak only when the words matter. My fingers move faster as I write about growing up invisible and how I once thought being overlooked was the same as being unworthy. I write about building something without applause and the power of learning that being underestimated is not the same as being incapable. Midway through the draft, my phone buzzes again. 17 unread texts from various family members. One voicemail from Diane. No subject lines, no apologies, just fragments. I don't open them. I don't need to. I open the mirror-facing app on my phone instead and check my reflection, not to fix anything, not to practice a smile, just to see. There I am, same face, same eyes. But something's different. I look steady, whole, and for the first time, undeniably me. I walk past the full-length mirror in the hallway, a habit I used to rush through. This time, I stop. I don't adjust my shirt. I don't tuck my hair. I just look. And I smile. Not to prove. Not to please. Just because I've made it here. I whisper it. The words so familiar now they don't even echo. I'm proud of you. No need for applause. No need for anyone else to agree. Because this time, I say it to myself. And I finally believe it. Sometimes, the hardest goodbye is the one you don't announce, just the quiet closing of a gate you once waited behind. That morning light through my new window reminded me, some things bloom better when no one's watching. I used to believe love had to be earned, noticed, or proven, but the truth is, self-worth begins when we stop asking others to name it for us. Family should never be a stage you audition on, and silence, when chosen, can be a kind of peace, not punishment. If this story reminds you of someone you've quietly outgrown or someone you learned to forgive from afar, I'd love to hear your reflections. Your voice, like mine, matters more than you think.